Hi, I'm Rob Zacny, and I reviewed Magicka Wizard Wars for IGN, the free-to-play PvP take on the Magicka series from Paradox Interactive. You know, a friend of mine is fond of saying that even a bad day of fishing is still a day of fishing. Now, I'm no fisherman, so I can't really speak to the veracity of that statement, but I think I understand it a little better after playing Magicka Wizard Wars. There is something kind of inherently fun about Magicka. I love being the silly, cute, semi-competent little wizard running around casting spells using this really neat combo system. And, it's always a game that yields a lot of hilarious action as spells misfire, as you accidentally kill your friends, kill yourself, kill your enemies. It's always a good time. But the thing about Wizard Wars is that while it's still a fun game, I'm not actually sure it's that good of a Magicka game. Its best parts are all things I think we've seen before, and I'm not sure it lives up to the promise of taking Magicka and putting it in an MMO format. Right now, we're probably looking at the biggest, clearest success that Wizard Wars has, a game mode called Wizard Warfare. It's kind of a team deathmatch, but as you can see, there's a spawn ticker in the lower left-hand side that tracks how many respawns your team has. And the first team to run out of spawns, of course, loses. There is one other twist, of course, is that you're fighting over these spawn points, and if you control all of them and the other team is locked out of respawn zones, it doesn't matter how many spawns they have left, they have nowhere to spawn. And so this is a game where if the teams are evenly matched, it builds toward a really dramatic and satisfying endgame. You'll have people sort of fighting over that one last spawn so they can get their team back in the game, or it'll just come down to the wire as the two teams sort of close in on 0 respawns and goes into sudden death where everyone has one life to live, and it's kind of a last man standing situation. It's fast, it's fun, it's really everything that like Magicka PvP feels like it should be, and so it really does sort of live up to what Magicka Wizard Wars seems like could be at its best. The other game modes, of course, I can't quite say the same. But I should mention here that sometimes just getting to these matches can be quite a bit of work. You're not going to see it in the video I captured because, catching error messages makes for bad video. But I will say that in my time with Magicka Wizard Wars, I spent a lot of time sort of watching the client stumble and fail as it just was unable to get me in match after match. So, once you get into a game, once you get into a match, for me, Magicka didn't perform that badly at all, but getting into that first match was sometimes a real effort, and there were some nights where I just had to give up after 10 minutes or so because either nobody was playing or the servers were just down. Given what I've seen of Magicka in the community, either one seems plausible, but it's not always the most put together game, and it might give you some unpleasant flashbacks to early Magicka. Now, this next game mode we're looking at here is Soul Harvest, which is probably the most traditional MOBA-type game mode in Wizard Wars. And it's probably the one I had the greatest hope for, and it's also probably Wizard Wars' greatest failure. So the object in the game, if you saw the little video, the little introduction that played a moment ago, the object of the game, if you've played any MOBAs, it's very familiar. You have to kill these little creep camps, and then eventually you will harvest the souls, these little glowing balls that the monsters give up. And at the top, it's tracking how many souls each team has gathered. When one team has gathered 300 souls, the shields on the enemy base come down, and their effigy, which is the Wizard Wars version of the Nexus, the effigy is vulnerable. And so then both teams have to run around and try and destroy the enemy effigy. And so this seems like it would have a lot of promise, but it turns out that Paradox was just too conservative, I think, in adapting Magicka to the MOBA format. And the big problem is right here. There's really no incentive for players to engage other players in this. It doesn't stop them from trying. People love to fight in this game. But actually, really the only thing that matters in this game mode is denying the enemy souls and getting more souls yourself. And so you're always better off ignoring other players and focusing on your rotations through the various creep camps, killing these little monsters, and just, rinse, wash, repeat. And it turns out 300 souls is a lot. This is a game mode that tends to drag on quite a bit. And really killing these monsters never gets much more interesting. And I think this is where the flaws with the idea of converting Magicka into a MOBA really make themselves felt, because Magicka, of course, is sort of flat, right? Characters aren't going to level up. Everyone's sort of gloriously equal in Magicka. Everyone is an equally crap wizard. Everyone has the ability to be just as powerful. That also means that you're not going to have sort of the things that traditionally make the MOBA genre work, which is stuff like leveling. Characters aren't going to scale later into the game. It doesn't get easier to kill monsters, unless, of course, you get a little better at it yourself. And certainly, I've got a routine down here. I sort of rotate to these creep camps and, hit them with a long-range shot. Then I set up a little minefield and wait for the monsters to come. Now, the thing that matters the most here is this troll, you'll see, and I'm engaging the troll here. The troll is probably the one part of this game where, the one objective where teamfights actually start to make sense, because what the soul gives up is a ton of souls all at once. It's sort of like the Baron and the Dragon rolled into one, if you're familiar with League of Legends. So it really does incentivize both teams to fight over this troll and get the kill, because then the team that controls the area when the troll goes down, that team will then suddenly get a big burst of souls all at once, which is really, really valuable and helps you win the game. But that is kind of the exception to the rule. By and large, you just don't want. There's just not much upshot to fighting other players, except around the troll. But as I was saying before, because everything sort of stays flat, the action of clearing these creep camps never gets much more interesting than it is at the start. And so these games tend to drag on, and they feel like they drag on, which is really unfortunate. And then, of course, there's a lot of problems with the end game. So here we've skipped ahead in the match to the end of the game, basically. The enemy shields are down. We've pretty much won by a mile. And now all we have to do is destroy the enemy effigy. And so what I've done is I waited until I could see the other players were out on the map, and then I sort of sneaked along the back door of their base, basically, and started tearing down this effigy. And here's the problem: if the other team is smart, and I've been on the losing side of this, you can stall the game out quite a bit if you just stay home and defend, because the spawn timers never really increase. So even at the end of the game, it doesn't get more volatile as team fights continue. So if your team is trying to help out and they're fighting the other players and they kill them while you're back in their base destroying their effigy, they have just delayed the end of the game. They've actually hurt your chances of concluding the game. And so the end games tend to be these really drawn-out affairs as teams just sort of bum rush and suicide against the effigy. As you can see, too, in this game we had 2 players disconnect, and that is depressingly common in this game. It could be that the servers are a little unstable. Again, I could believe it. I've certainly had enough problems with Magicka myself that I can understand people are getting, dropped from the game. But I've also had games where I've been clearly getting griefed. I've clearly had players leave and quit, and the problem is there's no way to report people. You go to the score screen for just a moment, and then you should have kicked out to gain your experience and see what you earned. But in a competitive game that relies on other players, the ability to sort of police and report other players is kind of crucial, and something that just doesn't seem to exist in Wizard Wars. So outside of the game, you can sort of play around with these metagame elements. You have treasure chests where you can buy keys. The keys are pretty expensive with the in-game currency, but of course you can buy crown packs that give you a lot of the in-game currency for a little bit of real money. And then, of course, there's the mastery tree, which allows you to buy new outfits, new gear, new powerful magics, which are sort of like the ultimates in a traditional MOBA. And so this is a way that characters can sort of scale and progress, and it does give Magicka sometimes the feeling of different classes. For instance, the mage I've been playing throughout this entire video tends to run a lot of death magic, and that's why I was sort of relying on death magic almost exclusively, because I had a huge bonus to spells that use death magic. If you develop your character another way and put different outfits on them and put different gear on them, you can sort of exaggerate other sorts of magic and incur little penalties as well. So there are metagame elements that sort of do differentiate characters and allow characters to get a little more powerful as you gain experience. But it's just, you know, it's not that big a deal, and it's certainly not something I ever found myself planning around much in game, because it was just too difficult to keep track of what everyone had, and ultimately the fundamental skill of Magic, which is picking counter spells, knowing what wards to cast, knowing when to deploy a shield, that will see you through the game pretty well, and you don't actually need to worry too much about always having the right spell for the right moment. And so, you know, Magicka just ends up being a little bit of a disappointment. You know, it's still a Magicka game, and therefore it still has quite a bit of fun to offer, but it never really lives up to the promise of a Magicka twist on the MOBA format. That's why I'm giving it a 6.4. It's not a bad game, and I had some good times with it, but it was always something I could take or leave, and it just never really surprised me with any hidden depths. Magicka is always fun, but Wizard Wars might just be the least fun version of it. Anyway, that does it for Magicka Wizard Wars. For more on combat spellcasting, keep your wand trained on IGN.